right, quite a few. Good. Tech Week has taken off the last few years, and this year, yesterday, having moved to the America Center was kind of an exciting milestone for us. So enjoy that. This session is really on talking about new media verticals, and in particular how video has changed and where it is and where it's going. So we'd like to make this interactive. So if you'd like to ask a question, shoot that QR code. I'll leave it up for a second, or a little bit, but shoot us a question and we'll see if we can't include you in the discussion. We're going to start by introducing the panel. So why don't you just briefly introduce yourself and what you do?
Sure. Joshua Johnson, assistant professor of film at Webster University, also a filmmaker and visual effects artist.
Michael Taylor, I'm with CPG Agency, so we're an experiential agency. We're celebrating our 40th year. We're headquartered here in St. Louis. We produce global experiences, and I'd say just about every one of those experiences has video component to it. We have an in-house video team who produces probably hundreds of videos annually for our clients across the world.
Hi, I'm Kelly Robson. I'm the founder of Pivot Better Learning. We're a healthcare education company. We do digital education exclusively for a lot of different healthcare organizations, from the Mayo Clinic to Pfizer to St. Louis University system, and all of the education we provide contains video-based learning. It's completed by our team of people. We have a studio here right on Locust, and then we have just a full team of video editors, motion graphic artists, animators, and different editors that put things in place, and then that lives inside a learning management system that we deploy for our clients.
I'm Paul Hyron. I'm a serial entrepreneur. One of my companies is called Big River Media Group. I have that with my son. We do video live streaming, full production. We do pay-per-view of MMA. We do live concerts for artists and for venues. We also do installs. We just completed a church just down the street doing a complete multimedia install. So the topics we're going to cover, we're going to look at what does on-demand video education and training look like today. It's changed a lot. Video platforms have changed a lot, and training has changed a lot. And so I look forward to you having a lot to say about that. The other topic is AI and automation. How is AI impacting production, graphics, video, audio, lots of impact. Independent filmmaking and digital distribution. The whole landscape has changed for independent film. So hopefully, Josh, you'll have a lot to say about that. And then interactive and immersive video experiences. We heard a game developer this morning talking about 3D atmospheres and environments, and having a game that is not just a storyline, but a multi-dimensional experience for the user. And then talk about what are the best prices for monetizing and scaling. This could be a 2-day seminar all by itself, because that has changed so much just in the last 2 months. YouTube changing guidelines, monetization opportunities on Instagram and Facebook Reels. So how is video evolving? So this year, about 78% of the people in the US will be digital video consumers. That's a pretty amazing number if you think about it. And we're splitting our time now between video platforms and social video. In other words, videos on social media. So social media video has really increased, almost double. And then it's projected to more or less flatten out. I don't really believe that, because between short and long form content, video is becoming much more watch time on social media. So users' average time spent per day is about 3.8 hours. Which sounded like a lot to me, and then I found another factor that from another report, and it says users average 17 hours in online video per week. So that pretty much matches up, not exactly. My wife will tell you that that's much more for me, but I'm usually editing some concert or presentation video at night. So she's watching TV and I'm on my laptop. A majority of marketers. So why is this important in this session? Because you have to go where the money is. If you want to make a career of this, you have to figure out monetization. And marketers who don't use video are considering it very strongly, but about 68% say they already use video. And social video and connected TV. So connected TV is really, broadcast TV has kind of gone away. Cable is dying quickly. I spoke at the cable show in 2018, and I don't even know if you could have that convention anymore, because that was all about licensing content and people using different cable providers being able to select their own content. These days, it's a whole different world with what's called connected TV, so internet-based TV. But about 70% of US agencies say that social video is a must-buy, but also 69% consider the connected TV area a must-buy. So that's where the money is. And the really interesting, to me, factor, and I can attest to this, about 79% of consumers are watching videos on a smartphone, making it the top device for video consumption. So not surprising, but that has real impact on how you produce what you produce. What size of font you use, if you're using lower thirds, do you do a tiny crawl that on a mobile device you can't read? Pointless to have it there. So there are lots of factors there. So I'd like each of our presenters to really give a 2-minute kind of opening statement about where they see video, what it's important to us. So Kelly?
Well, I see it from probably a little bit more of a narrow view than others, maybe just because we're just doing healthcare education. But what I can say is that even for physicians or nurses or patient education, you might say, okay, this is important stuff that people are going to view in any format. But the truth is, when things come digital, you're competing against everything that anybody's ever made that's online. That's another option available on their phone or on their computer and another tab at any time. And so that's really what we help large healthcare organizations do, is try to make the video education compelling enough that people are staying long enough to really view and like we like to say too, it's like if you've ever worked at a large organization and were required to take compliance training, people are like, oh yeah, I've done that, and it's super scary because it's just so awful. And it is. It's generally looks like a hostage video, or it's very boring. People don't put any effort into it at all, but it gets really scary when you think, a lot of this education for continuing medical education is required in younger and younger generations of clinicians that have always had a cell phone, aren't really tolerant of the kind of long form video content that, if it was available at all, that is out there. So we help kind of modernize the experience for people and create things that look more like a consumer video experience instead of one that you might see on a LMS or in education. And that's really gone over well. And then just doing things in shorter form. And a lot of these organizations too, like not just clinical education, but let's say, sales training for medical device and pharma companies used to get thick binders to read or books to read prior to new hire training. And what they're seeing is, like 10 years ago, sales reps used to pretend to read the books and didn't. And, and I remember that because I worked in that industry, and, there'd always be 10% of people that would just get sent home because they weren't willing or able to do the training. And then now they said, people are pretty emboldened and they're not even pretending like they're reading the books. They say, I don't read books. Do you have a video of this? Because that's going to be how I engage with it. And and that's pretty shocking for me. And then I was talking to some people with the Plant Science Center, and they're saying the same thing, like PhD students, our candidates are coming in to take on roles at some of the ag tech companies, and they're saying the same thing, that they don't read textbooks. I remember that was the big bill, and I don't know if it was, but that, you know, that to purchase your textbooks, and now they're less and less required, and students are learning through video education. So, you know, that's what we do, and it's like you got to rethink what it looks like. In a recorded Zoom call, sharing a PowerPoint just doesn't cut it anymore as far as like video-based learning, and so. So we're just kind of trying to make things that look like a master class, or look like a TikTok, or look like anything that we can keep people engaged long enough with the video content to engage with the learning objectives and really understand the material. So that's what we do.
Thank you. Josh?
Yeah, so I'll start with, so I currently teach at Webster University, been there about 3.5 years, and I teach film and video students, right? And also being a filmmaker myself, but I will say it's an interesting space to be teaching, because as we all know, like, it just continues to evolve and change, right? And I think one of the interesting things I've seen from students, I guess this generation, is yes, like they're watching things on their phones, right? And they want short form content. So, you know, occasionally I'll start, you know, a class and ask them, like, oh, like, so what movies did you see over the weekend? Like, what did you go see in the theater? Not very many are going to the theater to see it. There's always a couple, but it's shocking to me because, right, you're studying to be in film, and hopefully to be a filmmaker is kind of the dream. But maybe you're not watching as many movies as say I did, right, when I was an undergrad. So that's really interesting, and just to see how like the short form videos, you know, TikTok and YouTube and Instagram stories, that's really what they're watching. Occasionally, you know, I'll have students bring in a sample of something they really like or what they're watching, and it's not always from movies or TV shows. Sometimes it's like a TikTok video or something like that. And they're like, oh, like how do I recreate this, or how do I do this? So that's interesting, just to see that perspective, and to be teaching in that space, because for me, like, I have to continually, you know, keep up on everything, right? Because I'm also continuing to teach that. But from I think also, being a filmmaker and working in the film industry for almost 20 years, I've worked on maybe like 28 movies and shows, and obviously lots of commercials, and, you know, kind of all those things. And just to see how that's changed so much since when I first started, it's truly amazing. I mean, obviously, like, when you bring the AI side of it, that's one thing too, right? But just technology in general, how computers are getting faster. You can do so much just like in your own apartment, right? Your house, your own office. You can do a lot with just a computer. When I first started doing this, creating 3D work and waiting for renders was almost impossible sometimes if you didn't have a giant render farm to send your 3D renders to. But now you can do a lot just in your own apartment, which to me is pretty amazing, because, you know, it's the democratizing, right, of all these different tools. One side of that is really, really exciting as an artist, as a filmmaker. Because what once would have taken a huge team and thousands, if not maybe millions of dollars, I can do a lot of that myself, so one side of that is really, really exciting to me. But I think, you know, on the other side of that, some of these tools are certainly erasing, you know, kind of entry-level jobs, and that's absolutely, there's no way around that. As I've seen that. I know people that have been scrambling in the film industry looking for new jobs as well, just because of that. So, you know, it's really interesting to kind of to feel both sides, see both sides, and then also just you trying to educate and teach in the sector as well. But yeah, it's one thing. It always is changing. So I'm always continuing to educate myself. I'm a student always, right? I'm a student always to film in the video sector of it. So no, it's a fascinating space to be teaching in, but also to be creating in. And yeah, I'm just trying to keep up.
Thanks. Michael?
Well, we're all just trying to keep up. There's no doubt about that.
Full-time job.
You know, we're a creative agency, so most of what we do is in the B2B space. We also do a lot of internal communication, but, you know, ultimately for us, it's about storytelling, and really how we're bringing that story to life. Even, you know, I think about some of the, you know, the training videos that we used to do back in the 90s that were just, you know, it's, if you want a good laugh, go back and watch some of those now. But I mean, ultimately it's, again, for us, how we're bringing that story to life, whether that's in short form, long form, all the different mediums and tactics that come along. 20 years ago, it was all about, like Flash. And then 10 years ago, it was, every client wanted the hero drone shot in their video. And so, like right now, one of the biggest questions we are getting is, what value do we bring as an agency in a video production support versus, what a 20-year-old's doing on their iPhone. And I think there's really some amazing things that a 20-year-old can do on their iPhone. You still got to know how to use that iPhone. And so it's, it's like everything. We're masters of our craft. And so the tools and the tactics and the techniques and things will come along as we go, but it's really, how are we taking a strategy and how are we taking your message and how are we really telling that story that's engaging in the right format, on the right device, in the right environment. So that's really what we try to remain diligent and focused on. A lot of what we do is video that is just a small piece of a larger project of what we're doing, whether that's a broader communication campaign or whether that's an experiential activation or whether that's a national sales meeting, all of which video plays its place in that world. And it's also our job to make sure that we know where that place is, how long it is, and exactly what kind of story that it's telling.
Great. Yeah, from my perspective, I'm an old guy, so I have a lot of old stories, but I'll only tell one. So my high school was an experimental high school in Southern California, and they connected all the rooms, TVs, over a closed circuit cable network. And the idea was you wouldn't have the AV geek roll a projector into the room. He would come in with headphones and turn to the right channel on that TV. So we would take things like the French Chef and Galloping Gourmet and this stuff. And so they go in the home ec room and we play that video. Probably somewhat illegal, but because it was a school, it's probably fair use, I would think. But my friend and I, who built the studio there with the guy who was directing it, they made the mistake of hiring somebody from Hollywood to just run this little high school thing, which he had aspirations beyond that. So we started building out a studio and doing productions. So my friend and I were hired by the local cable TV provider. And he said, I want to do things to get viewership. So we said, okay, we've been filming football since our freshman year, and then we moved to video all the football games, the basketball games, and it's been a great coaching tool. So I said, let's video Cal State Fullerton baseball. He goes, well, number one, they won't let us, and number two, that'll be expensive. And I said, well, you're probably right on both. But the baseball coach had been our high school baseball coach. He graduated across the street to Cal State Fullerton. So we convinced this guy to buy a bread truck and about $30,000 worth of equipment. And we built this mobile truck and started doing community video and stuff. His viewership went crazy because then we could do the Brea Town Hall, we could do a concert that came into town, or the high school graduation. Skip forward, my son and I started doing live streaming in 2017, and one of our first events was a rap producer battle that we live streamed from the Grove. And now that same group does a monthly battle called Fresh Produce, where beat makers battle against each other with their beats. As well as that same group of guys, we all do MMA pay-per-view that's about once a quarter here in St. Louis, but the viewership is globally. So it's amazing the way things have changed. And seeing things like Vine and Snapchat really kind of starting things, but now both of those don't exist. And seeing YouTube go to both shorts and longs, and how long content has really taken off as well as short content, right? And now this mid-content range is getting a lot of traction, and YouTube's algorithms or having to adjust for that. But the same thing's true on Facebook. When we first, during the pandemic, started live streaming concerts on Facebook, they would shut us down nearly every time. They said for copyright. These are original artists doing their own songs. And one of the strikes was a band from Pittsburgh that put a strike on a band from New York that was playing at Focal Point. But the band from Pittsburgh had done a cover of their original song of the band from New York. So there are lots of things that are impacting how video gets delivered and what happens these days. So let's talk a little bit about some of those topics. So do you want to talk a little bit more about training?
Sure. So everybody's pretty into training, aren't you? Is there anything anybody wants to hear about on training in particular? I don't want to kind of go on about.
You said that you primarily create content and learning tools for hospitals, medical centers, pharmaceutical. Is it a combination of, is it mostly continuing ed? Is it, what is the, or is there just like three different baskets?
Yeah, there's different baskets of content. So, and what we do, and it's kind of important part of it, and is that we start with, like, we have a team of instructional design people that have worked in healthcare for a long time, and so it's kind of working with them. So we do a lot of public education with associations, like the American Heart Association is one of our clients, and then so kind of all kinds of different content for the general public, and then and then we do government work as well, where it's like public facing. So like during the pandemic, we did a lot of education around immunizations, and then we were the provider for SAMHSA, which was a 988, rolling out the mental health hotline. So just education that lives on social media is something that we do that's not gated or anything like that. And then, like you said, and then we'll do stuff that's completely like internal to organizations, and then that stuff like the continuing medical education, nursing education. One of our projects was for school nurses for the state of Missouri, and so it was taking a textbook that's like kind of the Bible for school nursing, that was, and turning it into completely video-based learning, kind of like we're saying, because people don't read the textbooks, and then having it not just have the, you obviously can't do video of a textbook, but dividing it into, like, that's where the instructional design comes in. So then saying, here's the different kind of subjects, and then building it into a learning management system where if a nurse needs to access, because kind of the idea of it was, I think, maybe 15 hours of learning. You're not going to sit down and watch 15 hours. You're going to say, okay, I have a child with asthma. How do I best handle this? And then being able to go and just visit the parts that you
just like they would with textbook.
Yeah. And so those are the kind of projects we get involved with, but definitely all of them have video in it, and then there's been a lot of interest too with interactive video. I don't know if you've played around with that. You might know better than I. We did a long demo that took maybe 4 months with Vimeo. Have you seen their product?
Mm-mm.
It's interesting. They have interactive video that's more than what so like, do you know those old like kids books where you pick your pathway?
Choose your own adventure.
Yeah, choose your own adventure. You can do that with Vimeo. Has a product. It's expensive, and it took me 3 months to get a price out of them, so this is valuable. So it's about $25,000 a year for the product. Their license fees for it, and but it allows you to do that. And I could send, if anybody.
Platform that you work off of?
Vimeo.
I know Vimeo is, but is it software that allows you to make those choices and then? Yeah,
and like create branching scenarios like within the video. It's really cool, but it's just, and then there's a competitor in England that's not as far along, but I don't know how, I think they acquired that technology from somebody else. I don't know if it's completely there, but I really liked the idea of it, because what we do now is we build the video interactive learning and kind of layer it in that way, but this would allow you to kind of remove that layer and instead just have people interacting within the video itself, which I think is the next step. I just was kind of like afraid to commit to that product because it seemed like it kind of was a little buggy still, and they're still working on it. But I think there's going to be a lot of people doing that, and then you could see, and it was a little bit complicated to use, like for the video editing team, they could do it, but and then you kind of have to really think, you know, how it's all going to work together and how you get people through that. But I think maybe with AI tools, that's going to change, and it's going to get a lot easier to build video that way. But right now it gets complicated pretty quickly.
There's actually a couple of game writing platforms or directing platforms, whatever, that already allow that multi-layering and pathing, so you can create alternate story paths in the game. And it basically, the background is all video in on those games. So it already has that functionality built into it. So you could look into those platforms if you're interested in that whole idea of a custom experience.
You have like a package where it's not just video, but also digital content?
Yeah, that's what we do. So yeah, so what we provide, a lot of our clients want like what we call like a signature package. So there'll be interactive learning, and then some people too, after they watch the video-based learning, you know, the experience where you don't want to try to like find the place in the video where you learn something. So then we provide like a graphically designed like course companion piece that's a PDF format, or sometimes people even print them out. And then also adult learners lose a lot of what they learn, you know, as time goes on. And so we've developed a micro-learning reinforcements that are delivered to the cell phone directly. It doesn't require a login, because you lose people with friction too. So if you have to log in, they're like, forget it, it's too hard. And so it comes to their cell phone, they hit it, and then they're able to tap through something that feels a little bit like scrolling on social media, but it's like a reinforcing like key learning objective. So if it's a course on atrial fibrillation or something like that, it's like, okay, learning objective 1 was whatever, and then there'll be like a 60-second video on that learning objective, and then some data, and then a link at the end where you can link out to more robust clinical information on the topic. And that's been really good as far as like reinforcing information.
My professional career for 25 years is in medical publishing. And we also did college textbooks. We were the #1 nursing publisher in college. We were one of the top 10 college publishers. And back then, they would develop the books. The editors would develop the books, and I would develop the companion content, which originally was workbooks, and then we moved to CD-ROM. For a while, Laserdiscs, which actually enabled that video branching. So we had a physics course where you could, depending on how you progressed in the lesson, you went to a different branch on the Laserdisc. It was short-lived, but I have Laserdiscs at home for Princess Bride. That's about it. I had Terminator, but I loaned it to somebody. But that is typical of where we've come. But now these days, what used to be the ancillary, being the media product, is now the primary deliverer in college, and the textbook is referential. Right? So it's interesting how that's been a complete total shift. So Josh, talk a little bit about how production has shifted. We used to have green screen and blue screen. We still use some of that augmented.
No,
but now we have virtual.
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, I started teaching at Webster about 3.5 years ago. And in the first year I was there, they were renovating like one side of the building, the communications building, right? And I saw some plans for this new green screen psych stage that was going to be put in. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But like, what if we get an LED wall instead? Like for virtual production, just kind of throwing it out there. And there were some other professors that were interested in that as well. Not exactly knowing what those prices would be, but I guess since the last time they looked into it, they came down a lot. And now we have virtual production LED wall at Webster University. In fact, we were the first company, education institute, including all production houses in all of Missouri to have virtual, which is shocking to me because, being an education institute, right? So it was pretty amazing to have that technology. But for those that aren't aware what virtual production is, or if you maybe heard the word of volume, Mandalorian season 1, I feel like kind of made it famous for the masses. But it's like an evolution of green screen, right? So you've all seen behind the scene photos of actors interacting, right? And you see the green screen or blue screen behind them. Well, now you can have an LED screen actually that's really high resolution, but it's not necessarily showing just projected video that someone shot, although sometimes you can do that, but it's actually being rendered from a program called Unreal Engine, which is traditionally used for developing and creating video games. But the graphics have gotten so good in Unreal Engine that the film community and actually lots of other markets are starting to use that technology because it's real-time rendering. So it saves a lot of time from a traditional kind of format. So for example, if you're going to some kind of fantastical location, right? You have the option of traveling to that place, right? Spending lots of money, location going to be there, actors, all of that. 2, you can, try to build a set, right? And depending on the possibility, you're probably going to be able to afford a small portion of that set, right? Or 3 now, or I should say 3, the green screen, you could do it, right? And kind of create afterwards, right? After the fact. Well, now with LED walls, you actually will be creating the environment before you even get to set. You create it in Unreal Engine, so by the time you get to set, you actually have this virtual environment that's on the LED wall. But not only that, the virtual environment communicates with your camera with tracking data. So as your camera moves, the background moves and the parallax happens. And that's kind of the real sweet spot of it. And so once you actually introduce a little bit of foreground set, like you're going to build a little bit of set too, just like if you were using a green screen. But it kind of changes the game because you can basically go to anywhere you want, right? On this virtual background, or, everyone loves to try to shoot at magic hour, right? A golden hour. In real life, you got about 20 minutes to get your shot during magic hour, right? But you could set up an environment with a virtual production and shoot all day, right? During magic hour. In fact, 2 years ago, the Batman movie that came out, I think it was about 2 years ago with Robert Pattinson, there's a scene on the rooftop and they shot that like during magic hour, but it was all virtual production, kind of using the help of the screen. So that evolution is continuing to happen. I've seen some AI models that are helping kind of generate backgrounds with that. So that's just going to continue to evolve. But I think one of the best things about that in my perspective is you actually have to communicate with everyone before you even get to set, right? To figure out what the background's going to be. Because I've been on lots of movie sets where we're shooting green screen stuff, but there's no background complete whatsoever. If the budget's high enough, sure, you might have some concept work that was created by artists, like, oh yeah, this is what it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to kind of look like that. But it's still a lot of guesswork, right? But with the virtual production, with the real background, you can actually light to that on the, like on your set, on the stage. You're actually lighting to that, and then you can go inside the environment in real time, as you're having discussions with the director and the DP, like, oh, let's change that light over there. Let's turn off the light. Let's change the color. You can kind of do that all in real time on set. Which is just a huge difference than what it usually is, because everyone's kind of heard like, oh, we'll fix it in post, right? Yeah. Well, now you're forced to fix it basically in pre-production, figure it out and have those conversations so you get to set and you have an idea about what you're actually doing. So I think that's pretty huge, and that's going to continue to evolve, I think for sure. And then, some of the other technologies that we're looking at and dealing with, I mean, honestly, like I also work a lot in visual effects. And we've been using AI for a long, long time. Sure. It's been there. It hasn't been talked about as much, and now I think in the recent, 3 years kind of explosion of it. But it's been built into lots of programs. I mean, shoot, it's been built into Photoshop in lots of ways for like 10 years or plus, not to mention our phones. So yeah, continue to use that. Just the LLMs, the learning that is happening within some of these programs is pretty shocking. And to me, the exciting part of it is I can just do so much more now by myself. And also, when it comes to like remote working, right? So I guess I started about 20 years ago, but I've lived in Missouri my whole life. And I've worked in like, I don't know, like I said, maybe like 28 movies, including like Disney's Hocus Pocus 2 and a whole bunch of stuff. But I've done that, primarily from here, unless I'm getting hired to go on set to visual effects supervise, which is a different job. But from the post-sided perspective, I can do a lot here. And that was something I was doing a long time ago, but now with like computers and, Zoom and virtual meetings, all that stuff is just so much more possible, because one of the key elements to that is communication, and you can have that communication and be able to go back and forth pretty quickly now, right, with technology and the internet. So that's really exciting part of it. And even with all the advances of I feel like technology and AI in general, something I remind my students and sometimes have to remind myself is like, even with all the technology, story is still king, right? Like it doesn't matter, like you can have the fanciest this and that. If your story is terrible, then no one really cares, right? What anything else looks like. It reminds me of kind of even just the evolution of cameras. If I go back to like my undergrad time and think about the cameras I had almost 20 plus years ago. They were not very good, right? This is before DSLRs even were used in video. And nowadays, gosh, even our iPhones are capable of pretty amazing video. And at Webster, we have like 3 different sets of cameras that students can like check out and rent, right? One is a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera from the lowest tier, which is a great camera in itself. And the highest, we have an Alexa camera, which is like a $90,000 camera most films are shot on. And often, you'll find students like, oh, I need the Alexa for my film. I need that. It's like, hold on for a second. Just because you might be able to get a pretty picture, which again, the camera's not going to do it itself. So much more goes into that, right? Production design, lighting, but just can get a pretty picture, regardless of how you got there, even if it's some kind of interesting looking AI image, let's say. None of that really matters if your story is not there, right? So story is still king. So still preaching and talking about the importance of story, I feel like it's even more important now because now we have a little bit more time to focus on the story because you can get, beautiful looking images a little bit faster with some of the technology we have.
Yeah, my son and I worked a lot at the 9 Network. A couple of the documentaries that you watch either on the West End or on Cortex, both of those have a whole lot of cell phone footage.
Oh, yeah.
The funny story is the camera crew tried to get some Metrolink footage and they almost got arrested 2 different times. And so Jesse said, don't worry, tomorrow I'll have your footage. And he just got on the Metrolink and rode and took a lot of footage on his phone. And that's in the documentary, right? And actually, they had to downgrade it to match their cameras, which is pretty amazing.
That is. Yeah.
So Michael, talk a little bit about video as it relates to commerce and advertising and companies, branding and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, again, we also preach story is still king, regardless of what format you're doing it on. I mean, I think when it comes to, how you're trying to approach a consumer, there's so much more that goes into that other than, just what the video is. And I mean, I think that that's especially important nowadays when we talk about all the different mediums that you're fighting for. It's funny, you mentioned Vine earlier. Vine continues to be one of my favorite platforms that ever existed, albeit its short existence. But Vine is basically TikTok now. TikTok is Vine on steroids. But, again, it's when it comes to monetizing, video in your product, I mean, so much more goes into it than just, what's the story we're telling and are we getting the right message in front of the right audience? Because you look at it's so much more than just viewership and impressions. You have to watch a video for a certain period of time before it even qualifies for monetization. And so even that requires such a volume that the monetization of it, it's ultimately what are your monetization goals. And so there's a lot that goes into that. When we work with actually putting out consumer-facing videos, for us, it's really less about how are we monetizing that, but we're looking at different metrics that we develop with our clients. And so, ultimately, we want to make sure that we're looking at the right conversions that we put in place, which can take on a lot of different shapes and forms versus just making a click or buying a product. And so, there's even some of the internal communication stuff, like you'd be surprised to learn that last year was probably about the time where we first started formatting videos specifically for a phone,
right?
Versus just everything being 16:9. And so, you can turn your phone sideways for a lot of things for a 16:9 phone, but I mean, you can't on TikTok for 90% of the time. And so, even when you're scrolling through LinkedIn or scrolling through Facebook, it's important that you're coming through and that the message is there from the very beginning, because if it's not there in the first 7 seconds, you're going to lose them. So
Used to be 20.
yeah.
That tells you where we are. We're really short on time. The other session ran pretty long, but does anybody have any burning question for the panel? All right, well, we thank you very much for coming to the session. And if you're interested, we'll see how the video turns out, but watch Tech STL and Emily will post it if it came out. It's a little dark in here, but I think I got it. All right. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.